If we talk about practical safeguards, I think it's important for parents and churches to understand today that ordinary images can be misused, that we are not in a world in which you can upload a picture of your kid to a public platform that is available for anybody to view and expect that that imagery is going to be secure or safe.
Lost and weary traveler.
She told me one time, you would never give a child that's 11 years old the keys to the minivan and say, hey, why don't you run down to the store and pick up some bread and milk and bring it back real fast? Yet, we have no bones about giving an 11-year-old kid unfettered access to an iPhone that can connect to anything and anywhere at any time. And we just normally don't really think too much about that.
May you find a light. May you find a light. May you find a light.
Hello and welcome to Protecting Our Children from Online Exploitation and Grace Live Conversation with Detective Tony Godwin and Dr. Rebecca Portnoff. My name is Robert Peters, Director of Institutional Response. Great to be with you and discuss a topic that, although it is often dark and challenging, it's something that's very relevant, and we're excited to be joined by two leaders in the field to discuss this topic from very different roles in the field, but very important angles on the world of online child exploitation. And hopefully some practical thoughts on what all of us, regardless of whether or not you're a practitioner in the field of child protection, what all of us can do to keep kids safe in the evolving world of online child exploitation, especially with the rise of artificial intelligence. Before we dig into our conversation today, a quick reminder of upcoming related training opportunities on our Safe Church Training Center at netgrace.org. Coming up soon, it's responding to minors with problematic sexual behavior in the church. I'll be presenting that alongside our fearless leader and executive director, Laura Teen. And that will be on June 3rd from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern time, so check that out. There's a tremendous prevalence of youth with problematic sexual behavior. That's actually about a third of overall sexual offenses, both within and outside of the church. So an important topic for all of us to grapple with. And with even more direct relevance to our topic today, it's the Internet Safety for Teens and Kids short form leadership course with Crystal Nordby, longtime law enforcement officer out of Wisconsin, and Mike Sloan, our director of safeguarding. And that will be coming up on June 23rd from 1 to 3 p.m. So definitely check that out as well. Well, without further ado, let's dive into our conversation today. I'll start by introducing Dr. Rebecca Portnoff. Dr. Portnoff has dedicated her career to defending children from sexual abuse. She holds a BSE. Would that be a Bachelor of Science in Engineering? I had to Google that one. Thank you.
That's right.
All right, from Princeton, and a PhD from UC Berkeley, both in computer science, and she's been working at the intersection of machine learning and child safety for over a decade. She acts as an ecosystem leader to address emerging threats against children via tech development, novel research, standard setting, policymaking, and cross-sector collaborations, bridging the gap between child safety experts, policymakers, and technologists. Some of you are likely familiar with the organization Thorn. Dr. Portnoff is currently the head of data science and AI at Thorn, where the machine learning and AI and algorithmic solutions her team builds have global impact. They're used across hundreds of law enforcement agencies, hotlines, and tech companies. But note that she is here today in her personal capacity and not as a representative of Thorn, though we are grateful to both her and Thorn for all the work they do in this space. We mentioned before kicking it off, I'll try very hard not to nerd out over the phrase socio-technical solutions to prevent generative AI-facilitated child sexual exploitation, a very intriguing line in her bio. And maybe time permitting, we'll unpack some of what that is and why it's so important. But odds are very good that you've been impacted by Dr. Portnoff's work if you use platforms like Google or Anthropic and all of the pieces that are going into that. Dr. Portnoff has a host of other awards. She's the MIT Tech Review 35 Under 35 interviewer. She's on multiple advisory boards. Her work has been recognized by a host of outlets such as the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, AP, Forbes, and more. Our second panelist is Detective Tony Godwin. He's been employed by the Garland Police Department for more than 31 years. He's currently assigned to the Northern Texas Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, where he served for 20 years. and he is responsible for the investigation of child molestation cases involving strangers, child sexual assault cases involving strangers, child sexual abuse material, internet solicitation of children for sexual purposes. He has conducted more than 6,900 criminal investigations as the primary detective into offenses related to the exploitation of children. He's also a certified computer and cell phone forensic examiner. Detective Godwin has also conducted joint criminal investigations, assisting the FBI, the U.S. Postal Service, DHS, the U.S. Secret Service, the National Crime Agency in the United Kingdom, and other local and tribal law enforcement agencies, all in this realm of online child exploitation. He is also a member of the Texas Association of Hostage Negotiators. And I think our initial intersection, Tony, the host of the Catfish Cops podcast. So shameless plug. Feel free to
Yes,
check.
sir.
It was a lot of fun, definitely. All right. If you want to learn more about Tony's work, check out the show Predator Hunters. It's currently on the A&E network, and it features some of the important work that they're doing there in Texas. So let's kick off our discussion today with you, Tony. Could you tell us a little bit about what online exploitation is? As your bio mentioned, you've been in this for a couple decades. How have you seen this evolve just over the course of your career?
Yeah, really good question. Thank you. As technology is advancing, it really boils down to things that we've known for a long time, which is still grooming. And so there's a manipulation that goes on, coercion. There are now threats, sexual exploitation of children that's taking place. And then that usually leads into the distribution of some sort of material that they have convinced a child to generate. Um, this is happening just everywhere on gaming platforms. This is happening on third-party applications every day. Um, as AI has grown and gotten bigger, we're seeing it more. The sextortion is going through the roof for us in law enforcement. We're seeing the development of all these fake profiles. The coercion is getting worse. There's aspects of some torture that's involved in some of this. And then the image sharing is even exponentially higher than what it's been in the past. Um, and a lot of this is generated with AI, and this basically the child sex abuse material that gets generated through those tools, and that has been very problematic for us.
What would you say, Tony? I'm sure you've heard this phrase, maybe from some of the individuals you've intersected with professionally on the other side of the aisle, who say, "Oh, well, this material that's AI generated, it's just fake. Why should we be concerned about that if it's quote unquote not of use or it's fake material?" What would you say?
Yeah, there's a number of myths that go along with AI generated stuff. That one I have heard many times, but it's just fake. It doesn't really hurt anybody. Nobody gets harmed. I will tell you that's absolutely not true. It's devastating for a child to be exposed to some of this type of material that's being generated. Um, the graphic nature of what it is, I mean, I know from firsthand experience of interviewing suspects who have been caught with this kind of material. Like, I literally had to look so good and so hard to be able to tell that it wasn't real. It's just devastating for a child. And so at the end of the day, we base our guidelines on a lot of the experts in the field, Rebecca being one of them, and she knows full well also this stuff is terrible. And when NECMEC, the National Center for Missing Exploited Children, considers AI generated material, CSAM, then that's really what we need to know. And that's a global thing. Even though we have it here, primarily here in the US, it is a global problem.
Absolutely. Dr. Portnoff, you've also been in this field for a bit. Can you tell us what jumps out to you in terms of how the issue of online exploitation is involved, and especially with the influence of AI?
Thanks. Just building on what Tony was saying, that if we focus specifically on AI-generated child sexual abuse material, this is definitely not a victimless crime. Like, let's talk about the fact that in a lot of these technologies are being used to alter photos of children, photos that were taken in innocent settings and settings to celebrate milestones of their lives, and are being turned into abuse material that is then being used to sexually extort these children, to bully them, to harass them. Survey research indicates that roughly 1 in 10 minors, they already know of peers using AI to generate nude images of other kids and then bully and harass these kids. So from both of a prevalence perspective and also the severity of the kinds of harms, like, this is definitely not a victimless crime. And I'm not even yet touching on the implications that this material has for the victim identification efforts of folks like Tony and other people who are out there day in and day out looking to safeguard and recover children who are in active abuse scenarios, and now have to determine, is this a AI-generated child, or is this a child that is actually in a abusive circumstance? So there's a lot here when it comes to the new intersection of harm that's occurring. I will just say we're building off of uh, a problematic space already in that online exploitation is not niche. If you look at organizations like the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, or NCMEC, which is the clearinghouse in the United States for reports of this kind of material, in just 2024, they received over 60 million images and videos of suspected child sexual abuse material in reports sent to them. So we're starting from a really uh, challenging baseline of material, and then we are seeing the we're seeing that get exacerbated in this new AI age.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do you have I'm curious, Tony, when the statistic Dr. Portnoff just gave about that million percentage, does that feel realistic to you just from where you're sitting on the law
Oh,
enforcement
it's
side?
yeah, listen, it's everybody across the country is just inundated with cyber tips and this self-generated material and the material being generated and shared commonly across all of these platforms. Like it's so difficult to keep up. It's so difficult. While everybody is federally mandated to make these reports, and they are a good thing, it's just I can't even tell you the amount of work. Like I think for in our first 5 months at my own agency, we were at 512 cyber tips from the beginning of the year, and that's growing exponentially. Like Rebecca said, we're seeing it so much. It's unbelievable. It's hard to even fathom the amount of tips that come through, and we get the weekly updates from NECMEC that talk about the number of images. It's staggering. It's really staggering.
Let's talk a little bit about what, given this is clearly an issue, clearly a prevalent issue, some steps we should be taking, whether that's as parents, as advocates, as ministry leaders, or just as members of faith communities. What can we do in this new landscape? First, I'll direct this first to you, Tony, just given what you're seeing on the law enforcement side of things. What do you think parents should be aware of when it comes to safety on different platforms, especially, say, gaming platforms or other apps geared towards children?
Yeah, I mean, listen, parents nowadays are doing a tremendous job compared to when I first came into this role, in the ICAC world 20 years ago. But they need to be watching and paying attention. There needs to be some real intentionality, some ability to just lean in and have these sort of conversations. If there's something that's surrounding any bit of secrecy, or if they're starting to see like their child is now all of a sudden having gifts show up, or they have, you know, uh, a card or a gift card or money that they didn't have before, maybe there's some new online friends that they've talked to, or they're talking about. Um, if they noticed on their device that maybe they're using some encrypted apps that might have some secrecy behind those are some pretty big indicators. And one thing I told to one parent group was this: if your student's, an A or B student, and then all of a sudden, just a very sudden, drastic change is now making, C's and D's or lower, something is going on. Now, does that mean that they've been exploited in some way? No, it doesn't. But what that does mean is that you should probably have some conversation. And there's a good friend of mine, her name is Sonia Ryan, and she gave me this little tidbit one time when I did an interview with her. And I thought it was very appropriate. And I think it's appropriate here. Is like, she told me one time, you would never give a child that's 11 years old the keys to the minivan and say, hey, why don't you run down to the store and pick up some bread and milk and bring it back real fast? Yet, we have no bones about giving an 11-year-old kid unfettered access to an iPhone that can connect to anything and anywhere at any time. And we just normally don't really think too much about that in terms of like a safety percentage and how that plays out. And it's not just phones, like you said, it's gaming platforms. It's all of the applications these kids are using. Like there are a lot of problems with it because of the dangerous ways that predators or those who are predisposed to kids can get in there and have conversations. There's direct messaging, there's picture sharing, there's file sharing of other, videos. Um, and so whatever they can do to isolate that kid. So those are things that I think parents need to be very intentional about and lean in.
Thank you, Tony. Dr. Portnoff, what's your perspective on the same question? How can parents engage and facilitate safety given this landscape. And maybe this is an opportunity to talk about what is meant by socio-technical solutions from your bio.
Well, I think what's coming to mind for me right now and what I want to acknowledge is that hearing that long list of all of the different ways in which things can go wrong for your kid can be really terrifying for parents to face, to acknowledge, to feel like they need to become technical experts in order to be able to protect their kids, that they have to understand what a disappearing message is and where it might appear. And so I want to just acknowledge that it's hard. Like Tony said, parents have had to learn so much more about how this environment works and operates than, maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago when the technology ecosystem was different. And so acknowledging that, I think the one piece of advice that I would give, research shows over and over again that the best thing that you can do for your kids is to have a trust relationship with them. And what that means is if something goes wrong in their life, they're going to come to you for help. They're going to see you as a person who's not there to scold them, who's not there to tell them, why did you do that? How could that have happened? But is there to help them deal with the problem. And so if you intentionally build that kind of trust relationship with your kids, what that means is even if you don't know the full details of everything that could go wrong in their lives, they'll come and find you when they need help, and you'll be able to support them and to navigate with them through that challenge.
Well said. Yeah, I think of just cases in prosecution, and I'm sure this is consistent with your all's experience as well. Some of the cases that really progressed in extremely problematic ways where there wasn't that foundation of trust or there wasn't that ability, which yeah, obviously deeply problematic for a variety of reasons. This is a similar question. I think I'll direct this to you as well, Rebecca. AI apps, AI applications that we see out in the wild, very easily accessible. Obviously, some initial regulation in this space. There are a lot of aspects that it's unregulated. Specifically, the concept of this nudifier app, which, if you're not familiar with that term, these applications that can remove clothing from regular photos. Detective Godwin was mentioning this a little bit ago. How can parents and organizations like churches, who often post photos of children on public social media profiles, maybe for vacation Bible school, things like that, how should they be thinking about this? And how can they act to protect kids from those who might exploit those innocent images?
Yeah, I appreciate this question. And just to not to be overly graphic, but just because I do think it's important to understand what these technologies can do. When we talk about nudifying apps, it's not just removing clothing from images. At this point, you can take an image and turn it into a video, and in that video, the person in the image is now conducting all sorts of sexual acts and activities that, you know, did not appear in the original imagery or otherwise were not contemplated by the original person. So it is not just removing clothes. That's already bad enough, but there is more going on here. If we talk about practical safeguards, I think it's important for parents and churches to understand today that ordinary images can be misused, that we are not in a world in which you can upload a picture of your kid to a public platform that is available for anybody to view and expect that that imagery is going to be secure or safe. And so from a safeguarding perspective, if you are a organizational administrator, you should have consent-based photo policies around how you are taking pictures and where you are posting them. You should be avoiding identifying children by their names, by their locations, their schools, like try to reduce that kind of personal exposure. When it comes to just like best practices for families, try to use private sharing albums where possible instead of public albums. Don't allow, if you're going to be using public albums, disable tagging. And so your kids are not directly associated with these kinds of, or with the public display of their imagery. Uh, in general, having this posture of treating children's images as uh, data that needs to be safeguarded, not just as content that can be communicated.
Well said. Yeah, I'm curious, Tony, your perspective on that. We've seen at Grace several inquiries just since the rise of AI, of, situations where maybe a church member, tragically, in some cases, a staff member, has been taking publicly available photos. maybe from a yearbook or maybe from, again, VBS photos, things like that, leverage AI in some of the harmful ways that Dr. Portnoff just mentioned. What's your perspective on how parents and organizations should be intersecting with public posting images?
Yeah, really good. Everything that Rebecca said is really spot on, and I echo everything that she did say. I will add just a couple things that I think churches in general now have a lot of child safety policies that are in place, which is fantastic. That's what needs to be done. Obviously, the background checks of people who are going to be around children and in those care sort of facilities, having a 2 adult rule in place, and one thing that I think has been sort of on the rise, and maybe it's more in a youth group sort of setting. I had a conversation in my own church with the leadership there because there's a tendency to want to go and use a third-party app in order to be able to communicate and facilitate communications between maybe the youth leadership and the children in the church, or depending on the age group and whatnot. And so I would be very leery of using any sort of private messaging third-party application unless it's been vetted by somebody, somewhere that is holding people accountable. And if you have some sort of mandatory reporting in place and the people that are ingrained into the church and into the leadership of that church, then I think things are moving in the right direction. But again, everything that Rebecca said, it's 100% right. I would just add those couple of things just to make sure if you're from a small area that maybe they're not doing those things, that might be something to implement.
We have a related question in the chat. I'll direct it to Dr. Portnoff first. Aaron says, thank you all for sharing about the dangers facing kids who use social apps. What are some best practices to bridge conversations with parents who are sharing photos or information of their newborn/infants on media sites? Thank you for your work.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. And I think it gets at a very challenging reality, which is you can have good intent in what you are sharing and still have negative consequences emerge. And so I think that's one way that I would approach this conversation is you don't want to be adversarial. You're not making assumptions that they're a bad parent or that they're not loving their kid because they're doing this, that in fact, you understand that they're celebrating their child. They want to celebrate their child, but there are unintended outcomes that come from this. And I think that approaching it from that non-combative lens while still being really clear about the actual risks that are emerging, that's what I would suggest.
Tony, anything to add?
Yeah, again, everything is spot on with what Rebecca said. The only thing I would say is again, people are going to celebrate their kids. Understand the settings of the platform that you're on. And if you don't, there are places that you can go to get a fact sheet and understand how to make it a little bit safer. Also understand that when some of these platforms, I know with a lot of parents, Facebook and Instagram is such a huge one. If there's an update to the app, or maybe it updates on your device, make sure you go in and check your security settings, have things in place, two-factor authentication, have some other way in case something goes awry and someone's able to get in and maybe hack that account and take it over. Just also be aware of what you're showing your child in. I see a lot of middle school and high school parents who are showing their children wearing a school shirt with a mascot or something on there, which is very easily identifiable, and just a way to give somebody who might be predisposed to that the ability to kind of do a little bit of doxing and figuring things out and a little Google searching to kind of narrow down where exactly that person is, even though most people, I think, even adults, share a little too much information online than they should. But at the end of the day, that's what these things are all about, having some conversation, raising awareness, educating people as to just ways to tweak things and do better,
Next question in the chat I see, can we backpedal if we posted our children on social media but haven't in the last decade? Any words of wisdom for that, starting with Tony?
Listen, you're not going to be able to unring the bell you've already rung. At the end of the day, you can absolutely make sure that your settings are put where, they can't be shared or tagged or moved and, without you having some sort of notice about it. So understanding what that app can do, being aware of that. You can always take those down. I think we would all agree that once you hit send on the keyboard or on your phone, at the end of the day, you're probably never getting any of those images back, even though they're sort of in your what you feel is your private area that's not necessarily so private unless you're really, really good about it. So just use some precautions. Maybe, Rebecca, do you have anything to add that would help out with that?
I think what you said earlier about understanding what options exist for you from a platform perspective, like what type of features you can take advantage of, that applies to this question as well, like what it does look like to um, I, make sure that you understand what platforms can offer specifically to either remove old content or make the content that does exist private moving forward. You can't undo what you have already done, but you can make sure that there isn't any for future access or misuse.
I appreciate what both of you had pointed to, just as a parent, on the difficulty of parenting and in the modern world with all of these pieces. I think one of the challenges that many parents, yourself included, struggle with is how do you explain, the gravity of what we've just discussed to your kids, both as potential victims or ways to avoid victimization in the age of AI, as well as, I think this is maybe less addressed, as peers. I think you had the study earlier, Dr. Portnoff, about the prevalence of peer usage, of AI and knowledge of among youth of others who've been victimized through AI tools. So how can we intersect with this, with our kids in a productive way? I'll direct that to you first, Rebecca.
Yeah, I got a chance to share earlier some thoughts on what it looks like to build that trust relationship with your kids. And I think from the point of view of if your child is approaching you to like saying that this got made of me, this thing has happened and I don't know how to handle it, to assure them that this is not their fault, that they're not going to get in trouble for this, that you're here to help them, that you understand that the consequences feel really real and that the confusion and the hurt that they're experiencing, like don't minimize it, but affirm it. And then make it clear that you're the adult in the room and you're going to help them. You're going to help them report it. You're going to help them navigate it, that they're not alone in this and that you are uh, stepping in to play that role of being the adult in the room. And then when it comes to peers who are tempted to use these tools, I think that's a real hard one. I would say when it comes to some of the why that behind why kids are creating this content, there is a variety of reasons. And understanding the why, I think, becomes important to address like, for your own kid how you're going to respond. So making sure that they know that this actually is not funny. If they're doing this because they think it's funny, it's not. It's not funny. Here's the harm that like actually is created. Here's where it's literally illegal to do what you just did. This is not, or hopefully we're not at that point where that's when you're having a conversation. Hopefully you're having it beforehand. But yeah, like pointing out the severity of what this is, that the harm is real, that this is not something that is a joke. All of these are things that I think can be productive conversations before the point of having to deal with the aftermath. But I'd love to hear Tony's perspective as well.
Yeah, that's it's really spot on. One of the things I was going to say that as you were talking is, and I can't remember the stat. You will probably know it far better than me because I think it's actually from your wheelhouse. But gone are the days with technology for the old people like me. Like I'm closer to 60 than than I am 50. But at the end of the day, we now have a generation of parents who have children in middle school and high school, and that generation of parents, if I remember seeing an old stat, there was like maybe 42% or 44% of parents have pushed out their own self-generated sex abuse material, and so it's normalized. And so we need to change this paradigm that this is not normal. I do agree 100% that we want our kids absolutely to come to us. We want to have that trust relationship, and we need to build that. That's not a one-time talk. And I'll just say very quickly, like I hear this a lot from parents who say, well, I need to have the talk about, things sexual and things online and the dangers and all these things, but it doesn't need to be the talk. It needs to be multiple talks over time. My podcast co-host, Brandon Poor, sells this perfectly the way he says this. When he says, listen, we talk to our kids about brushing their teeth when they're little, very tiny little kids. And we're like, time to brush your teeth. And we brush the teeth for them. And then as they grow up and they become toddlers and then, very young, We're like, have you brushed your teeth? Go brush your teeth. We brush our teeth twice a day. We're constantly reiterating it. Then they become middle school, and then teenagers are like, bro, have you brushed your teeth today? Go brush your teeth. And so we're constantly dripping on our kids about this wellness for our mouth. Take care of your mouth. Why are we only thinking that we can do this talk one time? We need to be so intentional and leaning in, and we need to avoid the freak out mode, because that's what happens when a child does trust mom or dad and comes to them and says, oh my gosh, this image was used. This is not me. I mean, it was me, but it was morphed into something that I didn't do. And having to, bare their soul to a parent that they know what's going to happen. They know mom and dad are probably going to freak out. You have to temper that. You have to love on your kid. You have to be super intentional about that. Age appropriate conversations as they're growing up is the key to this. And then that trust is built, like Rebecca said, and then they will come to you and they will say, and then that's where you stand right on the ground of what she did say. I'm the adult here. I'm going to get you through this. And we're going to get this reported. We're going to talk to some professionals. We're going to move this forward. And then that's where I come in on the investigative side. I will be your advocate. I will be here to help you through this. I will make sure that this doesn't define who you are, right? This is a mistake that was made. We're going to move forward with it. And that's how we're going to handle it.
I think that baseline of trust that you both have talked about is so important, and I think that's critical. As you both have mentioned, these conversations before there's a crisis is critical, and having that foundation in the relationship is huge. I think of another Catfish Cop, not on the Catfish Cops podcast, though they're great, and for more great analogies from Brandon Poor and Tony, check that out. But Undercover Cop, one of the jurisdictions I practiced in, he had a persona of a youth who was a gender minority, and this was a more traditional conservative area. And it was like extremely popular with online offenders, just flocked to this persona with that understanding. He had built that persona really well. And so again, this was persona meaning a fake child didn't actually exist. But he built that persona in a way where that child was not supported, was not have the ability, to have open communication with, again, the non-existent caregivers in this fake persona's life. But that's a dynamic to not imitate, right? There has to be that support and connection, or problematic dynamics can emerge when there is a crisis like this. I think it's also important, we talked about, I think justifiably so in the prevention world for the past several years, the wisdom of what you post online, how children are depicted online, et cetera. Maybe that focused on things like, avoiding bathtub photos or things like that. But from what both of you have discussed, I think just both of what we're seeing in the broader field, now that initial step of even a compromising photo, in the case of like a sextortion case, an initial photo in a period of undress, for example, that's no longer necessary for sextortion. And we see so many cases where perfectly innocent photos are the starting point, and then that's leveraged by perpetrators for a variety of reasons, be it finance and otherwise. So all really important conversations to have, maybe not the most fun to have, but important to have. And I love that framing, Tony, of it not just being the talk, but a series of conversations. I'd like to step there for a second, since I'm sure you both have some significant experience with this. What are you all seeing? And I think you both might have touched on this a little bit, but what are you all seeing in the world of sextortion and how AI is impacting sextortion? Maybe let's kick that off with you, Tony.
Yeah, one of the things related to that, it kind of goes back to one of the things we talked about earlier, which is there seems to be some myths out there in terms of this, and the fact that a lot of people think, well, this is something that only happens to girls. And that's really not true at all. There's an awful lot of young men who are targeted, especially in the financial realm. If you think of it that way, it's a numbers game. And I see a lot of young males who are being extorted financially. And then there's a different side of it where people are being extorted because of the depravity of where the person who is, predisposed to a child is living in their own mind, and some of that takes a real dark turn into torture. There's people that are out there that have this predisposition who thrive on the control and the manipulation and getting a child to do things to harm themselves. And it's the most unthinkable that is out there. It's the hardest thing for someone to grasp, is that there's an element of people out there looking to see children harm themselves. Aside from the sextortion that's happening on the financial side, that seems to generally happen primarily with young boys, at least in my experience. That's what I deal with primarily.
Dr. Portnoff, your thoughts?
I think just to build a little bit on what Tony is saying, I'll offer two really unfortunate statistics. Survey research shows that 1 in 8 child victims of sexual extortion have been threatened with a deep fake that someone made of them. And reports from organizations like the Internet Watch Foundation that review AI-generated child sexual abuse material and child sexual abuse material, they've found that 39% of recent AI-generated child sexual abuse material depicts extreme content like sadism. So just not much positive I can say about that, but it gives a sense of the challenge that we're up against.
Absolutely. So let's step into a scenario. If a parent were to discover something like this, an AI-generated deepfake of their child online, certainly their initial steps, I can imagine and have seen, Tony, that present challenges on the prosecution side, and I'm sure the law enforcement side. What are some of the first steps a parent should take if that happens, and maybe as importantly, some steps they should not take?
Yeah, this is always a great area to talk about. Number one is, and I already mentioned this, is temper the freak out. Right, your tendency is to go crazy real quick and yell and scream, and you're not going to accomplish much in that sense. Number two is try the best you can to preserve what it is that has been discovered, whether it's imagery or communications or self-generated stuff or AI-generated stuff that looks very real, like your child may have done something, which they may not have done. But you're not really thinking very clearly when you are confronted with that. You have to figure out a way to document things and get things done, but do so, and this is one of the don'ts. Don't forward what you believe is child sex abuse material from your child's device to your own device so that you can then delete it from your child's device. Because number one, that's probably a crime where you live. I don't know the laws of all the states, but I will say, generally speaking, that is sometimes viewed as a crime. And while we're not looking to make charges against somebody for that, it is something that's certainly in the wheelhouse of what could be done. You need to report it right away. My best advice on the phone side, because primarily that's what where these things are happening through cellular devices, is put the phone in airplane mode immediately. And there's a host of reasons why that's the case. The secondary thing I would hope, and maybe this is more on the preventative side for parents, is I hope you know how to access your child's device. I hope you know the passcode. I hope you know the swipe pattern to get in, because I can't tell you how many parents I encounter who are concerned about something, but they don't know how to even get into the child's device. That is not the child's device unless they bought it and they're paying the bill. That is your device. And so you just allow them to use your device, so know what those are. Get it reported as quick as you can. You have some ability to do that. There's a takedown program through NECMEC that can get the imagery removed, hopefully pretty quickly. There's reporting you can make to NECMEC. You can report it to the third-party application itself that's in play, if that might be Snapchat or Instagram or Facebook or whatever. Contact your local law enforcement. They may not have an ICAC person in their local PD, but I promise there's an ICAC task force. There are thousands and thousands of them around the country that are more than happy to take that report and then allow yourself to decompress. Take the phone away from your kid. And then the last thing I'll say, and I'll turn this over to Rebecca, is remember that most houses in America have a junk drawer. And in that junk drawer are extra phones. Like when people upgrade a device, they just throw the old one in the junk drawer. Remember that those phones still work. if you're going to secure the devices, the tablets, the computers, the phones from your child while this is being looked at, remember the old devices, because kids are pretty savvy. Kids will go and recover an old phone, charge it up, and it will connect to a Wi-Fi, and it will connect to their apps, and they can possibly remotely wipe and destroy some evidence. And so that's why I say put those devices in airplane mode immediately.
That's all such compelling advice. I don't have a ton to add. I think maybe one thought I'll introduce is if you find yourself in a circumstance where this is something that happened with peers from school, or we're talking about in the church setting. Um, I think communicating with the administration there, the importance of preserving evidence as well, like not just on your own devices, but let's understand how this is circulating within devices of peers, what it looks like to also make sure that they know that they ought to have policies on these and that you expect them to enforce those policies. And part of being that adult in the room is to communicate clearly to those organizations your expectations of how they're supposed to show up on behalf of your kid.
Very well said. We have quite a few questions. Your thoughtful comments have sparked a couple. We'll see how many we can get into. One is, could you discuss what you're seeing around the prevalence of peers being involved in some of this exploitation, specifically teens? What can churches do to support families in their congregation or teens in their youth group as they navigate this? Maybe let's go to you first on this one, Rebecca.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned earlier that unfortunately, like survey research shows that 1 in 10 minors know that their peers are using AI to generate nude images of other children. So this is um, unfortunately quite prevalent at this point. When it comes to what it looks like to help kids navigate this, I mean, I loved what Tony had to say earlier. I'm going to just, butcher it, but multiple conversations, not just the one conversation, early conversations, age appropriate conversations. These are all really critical lodestones. And then I just mentioned the importance of, from a parent perspective, of advocating for your kid with like expectations around policies. I think that as a church administrator, doing the same thing, like asking your church leadership, where's our policy? Do we have it? Who has provided input into it? What kind of, expert review has occurred? That these are all proactive things that can be done before the moment of having to navigate the actual harm.
Perfect. Tony?
Yeah, I love what she said. And the only thing I would really kind of echo is, and this goes from a parent standpoint as well as it could be incorporated in the youth group sort of mindset along the terms of policies, procedures, and whatnot. But I'm a big fan of like having like a contract. I've done it with my own children. I have drawn from some examples. I have one on our website that people are more than welcome to go and pirate and take anything off of there that you like. And what that does is it creates a couple things. It puts in expectations on the table. It lets everybody know up front, okay, hey, there are actions for consequences. And so you can take this across the plane from the parent field to the church field with the youth, because you want to have these healthy conversations. And, kids are kids. They're going to do things, and they do things that unfortunately don't always end very well. And so you got to have something in place that just allows the ability to facilitate those conversations in a healthy way, before anything really crazy gets out of hand. And generally speaking, it's just a good thing to have in place. So,
Tony, a question for you in the chat. I think this would have been relating to the resources you were mentioning, Nick Mac, etc., asking for how folks would reach out to those resources. Nick Mac, I believe, is missingkids.org. I can say that.
it is.
What was your website?
Ours is through our podcast, catfishcops.com/resources. And on that resource page, we try to partner with as many professionals in the field that we can. Some of it we created, some of it we did not, some of it we work in conjunction with. And it's just we try to make it as robust of a site as you can possibly think about, because on there, we are connected through the Carly Ryan Foundation, who has done this exhaustive research on a one-stop shop for if you don't understand the settings for an application, you don't know what Snapchat's about, you don't understand what happens in Snapchat, go and download the one-page fact sheet that tells you, hey, this is what it is. There's a secondary page in there that might tell you, here's a better way to make it a little bit safer for your kiddo. Make sure these things are in place. And there's all of the common apps. These things change all the time, so they're constantly going up and down. There are contracts that you can have with your kiddo. You can, what it's going to do is spark a conversation. You're going to have this conversation about A, B, and C, and then you're going to set your expectations. You're going to allow your child, age appropriate wise, to say, well, here's how I feel about it, or here's how I'm kind of for this or against this. And maybe it sparks some discussion and conversation. But at the end of the day, this is what we have. And so that's something you just put up on the fridge, and it's just an intentional way that you can go back to it and you can see it and be like, oh, hey, how are we doing on this? We have things on there about monitoring programs. And while I'm a fan of those, I've used those with my own kids. It's not a replacement for you as a parent to do your own due diligence. You do need to still have these conversations. You do need to still maybe spot check your kid and go through their devices. And you need to make sure that that's an expectation that they know, so that it's not a big shock. And if you do this over a course of time, it just becomes what happens, right? Especially if you have more than one kiddo, you've saddled this on your oldest, and now your next kid, and then your third kid. By the time your youngest gets around to it, they just already know. They're like, oh, you want my phone? Here you go. Here's my phone. So anything on that site, you're welcome to do. There's plenty of links to other professional sites that can help out with just about anything that may jump up at you.
I have a question in the chat for Dr. Portnoff. Do you have any insight on what risks may exist with photo sharing picture frames? Any thoughts on that?
I think it probably depends on the particular product and what kind of safeguarding they have or have not put into it. Maybe at a 10,000-foot level, what I would say is if you have photo sharing, which is private to folks that you approve, then the threat model is, do you trust the people that you have shared that photo app with? And the unfortunate reality is that not every offender is a stranger, and that in fact many offenders are not strangers. So that's one thing I would suggest. And then, yeah, just reiterating, it probably depends quite a lot on the particular product.
I'll go ahead and throw another question at you from the chat. Are there examples of a third-party app that is secure for Christian leadership to use so that too deep leadership occurs even on online communication?
That's an interesting question. Oh, Tony,
Yeah,
save
I
me.
was
Go ahead and
no,
answer.
I don't. I'll be honest with you. The short answer for me is not that I'm aware of. The only one that I know has any relevance at all is really, it's called Covenant Eyes, but it's more not so much directed at young folks. It's more directed at males, because males have bigger problems with things that go online and lots of issues that get created within a marriage. So that's maybe something. It may have been updated and does other things that I'm unaware of, but no, I'm drawing a blank on that one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there was a question in the chat to repeat the question, which is, are there examples of a third-party application that's secure for Christian leadership to use so that too deep leadership occurs even online communication? I too don't have a particular recommendation to make, but what I would say is I think there's a host of potential systems and structures one could set up. But I think there are key principles that need to be in place. I think the question itself reflects that, specifically that you have that too deep leadership piece, that there is designated avenues of communication, especially when you're dealing with communication between staff, for example, youth group leaders and youth, etc. What are those expectations so that when there is some sort of policy violation, it's easily identifiable, it's interruptible, and it can be addressed in a quick manner to facilitate safety versus permitting secrecy and ambiguity that compromises safety. So I think there's a host of ways to get there. There's some specific pieces that could look like. I It feels like malpractice to not ask you this question, Dr. Portnoff, while you're here. What are companies doing about AI-generated child sexual abuse material, and how can parents help push for greater protections?
I appreciate that. I spend a lot of my time these days thinking about what platforms and companies can be doing and should be doing in order to prevent this kind of work. So I'll just say at a very high level, none of this harm is inevitable. You can control the way that you design and develop and ship these products to prevent the creation of this kind of abuse material and minimize its impact. And so what that looks like is socio-technical engagement, understanding where humans and technology interact and what it looks like to implement these safeguards way upstream. So just to pick one particular example, these are all built off of training data. And if you are filtering your training data sets for your generative model of child sexual abuse material, then you are doing not you're not going to fully solve the problem, but you're absolutely going to take a positive step forward in preventing your model's capabilities to produce this kind of material. As far as how parents can push back, I think there's a lot of organizations that focus specifically on platform accountability. So I'll just name the HEAT initiative as one that has done a lot of work around pressuring big tech to prioritize these kinds of safeguards. For me, I also think that you can always, what's the phrase, vote with your wallet. You know, you can make a decision about who you're going to give your money to and what companies you're going to, yeah, what products you're going to use and what you're not going to use, and have that be a decision that's informed by whether or not these organizations are following existing best practices on how to safeguard kids on their platforms.
Absolutely. Tony, anything to add?
No, that was very well put. Like I said, a lot of the companies, they already know this. This is something that's been going on for a long time, and the development of all this is really it's changing all the time, the dynamic of it. So basically, they have some responsibility as well, which has already been indicated. But if we do this and we're able to empower people, I think that these companies that are developing these protocols is all about transparency. To tack on to what Rebecca said, the only other group I know about that's a huge advocate for different change in my arena anyway is called Raven, Raven, and they are constantly, looking to make good changes. And again, I echo exactly what she said about people want you more than you realize, and they want your donations. And so use that, do your homework and do your due diligence and donate wisely. Don't just watch a reel that looks enticing and looks like it's got the answers to everything, because it may not. And just be careful where you put that, and put it into some reputable places that can help you in the long run.
As we move towards the end, just a few remaining questions. How do you both see this evolving? What advances do you expect to see, both in terms of AI-generated child sexual abuse material trends, as well as the way platforms are addressing it? What do you see on the horizon? Maybe starting with you, Dr. Portnoff.
I think the answer to this question really depends on who steps up and leans in. So with that said, if I assume that everyone who's already working and the way they're working continues to work on this, I think we're going to see a growing unfortunate intersection with wearable tech and AI-generated abuse material, where you have the ability to secretly and without notice take photos and videos of people who are just living their lives going throughout their day, and then turn that material, as we've discussed, into other kinds of more abusive content. So there's real privacy implications there and safety implications that I think are I continue to be on the horizon. As far as what we can do to safeguard against this, this is a little bit in the technical weeds, but for my part, I think that we need to do a lot more to ensure that open source is a positive development as opposed to a enabler of criminal activity. So by open source, I mean models and technologies where anybody can kind of inspect them and take about their guts, and like got all the benefits of transparency. You really understand how they work. You can experiment with them, but it also means that you're facilitating access to criminals and offenders who then repurpose this technology for their own for their own outcomes. And so putting in safeguards that enable the positive outcomes while still controlling for that real negative circumstance. It's a challenging problem. It's one that we don't have all the answers to, but it's one that I have a strong desire to see more investment in that space.
Thank you. Fascinating. Tony, your predictions.
I mean, it's gonna increase exponentially as we know it. I think we're gonna see more and more realistic deepfake stuff. We already are seeing things with deepfake and AI, with the cloning of voices. We see a lot of exploitation that takes place in that arena because the voice sounds like mom or dad, and so the children tend to believe this. I think we're going to see and expect that detection tools, I hope, are going to be on the increase where we're better able to detect when something like this is in place. Unfortunately, I think we're going to see a lot more sextortion. I think we're going to see a lot more peer-to-peer misuse by other minors, because they just know technology and are so ingrained with it when most parents are not. I think we're going to see on the AI side, I think we might see more things get geared, I hope, towards age appropriateness in terms of design. But I think our strongest advocate moving forward from where I sit is we need to strengthen the laws. We need to figure out things legislatively to be able to address where we're going to go and what we're going to do. We are behind the power curve right now, in charging, in prosecuting. Charging and prosecuting, as you know, Robert, are two very different things. And so we really need to be thinking smartly about this. We need to be coordinated in what we're doing. And I think that coordination needs to land across technology and law enforcement and schools and parents in our communities, and most importantly, those in the legislature that are implementing these sort of things once they're brought to it. So take an active stance, take an active role. We can't fear it. It's already here and it's only going to grow. So we need to do the best that we're doing to keep above bar with where we're going.
Absolutely. Well, last question that we have time for, and again, see many great questions in the chat, and apologies we can't get to all of those, but you both have catalyzed some engagement, so well done. It seems that very few are asleep, which is always an accomplishment in the virtual space, so thank you both. We've obviously talked about some of our significant negative aspects. To maybe end with a little bit of hope, if you have any hope, what are maybe some ways that AI has some promise for advancing child safety? We talked about how it can be leveraged by bad actors. Are there any sort of kernels of hope that we can draw on here within the same vein? Let's maybe go to you again, Dr. Portnoff, and then close it out with Tony.
I live and die by hope, and so I got that in spades. I think I'll answer your question, but I also want to first just reinforce these harms aren't inevitable. There are preventative designs that can be put in place in order to mitigate, minimize, and stop this abuse from occurring. And so I want to say that real loud and clear, because as far as where I have hope, that's a part of where I have hope, is that this in fact can be prevented, that we are not going to just endlessly see more increasing abuse, that we can prioritize these upstream interventions, in a regulatory capacity, in a standards capacity. There's so much that still can be done. So I'll get off my soapbox now. And as far as what it looks like for AI to help facilitate that kind of rapid response, certainly that's a lot of what I've spent the last decade of my life doing, is building out these kinds of machine learning and AI technologies to help accelerate victim identification and, discovery and removal of abuse material online. So these types of technologies, when they are implemented in a thoughtful way, when they are used as like support for prioritization and triage, when they incorporate that human oversight element, they really can have a very positive impact to accelerate workflows of those that are boots on the ground, actually doing the investigative effort to help safeguard kids.
Thank you. Very well said. And thank you for the hope. We need your hope in spades. Tony?
I mean, listen, this gathering of people here alone is great hope, right? You got a whole group of people around the country who are willing to forego lunch or just after lunch or before lunch, wherever they are in the world, to listen in to a couple of people talk about things, and I love the passion that's there, and it exudes. Everything Rebecca said is great. I love how I wrote it down, implemented in a thoughtful way, and I think that the platforms now are doing so many tremendous things to help in terms of reporting and parental controls and detectors and algorithms that are getting this material squashed from the word go. And I think that's fantastic, and that's just where we have to continue to hope that it's going to continue to develop, because nobody nowhere wants a child to be harmed. I mean, I have yet to meet the person that is going to stand up and say, yes, we want this to happen. So as long as we continue to see advancements in, having more control and having more things come to light, locking down your privacy, I think everything's moving in the direction, hopefully, that we were all, going to embrace and understand the technology a little more. It's all for the best case scenario. Nobody wants the kids hurt. None of us do. And so, yeah, there's always room for improvement, but I think where we sit right now, things are looking okay.
Well, thank you both for giving of your time to this topic, but more importantly, just for the work that you both do. This would be a very different world and very different work without everything you both have poured into it for years. So thank you for that. Thank you for taking the time to share your hard-fought lessons, hard-fought insights with the group today. Thank you all for your attention. Lots of deserved comments, positive comments in the chat, just for the insights that have been shared. Once again, there were several questions today around best practices, safeguarding responsibilities, etc. In addition to the resources that our wonderful speakers mentioned, make sure you check out netgrace.org, especially our Safe Church Training Center. I mentioned the upcoming webinar on youth with problematic sexual behavior, the peer issue you heard discussed today. That's a very real topic, and AI definitely impacts that topic as well as our upcoming webinar on internet safety for teens and kids, both in June. So check those out, as well as other resources at our website, netgrace.org. Thank you for staying over just a couple minutes, and thank you again for our speakers. Keep doing what you're doing, and we all greatly appreciate it. Take care, folks.